Our group consists of Christeena Saji, Gregory Ziegler, and Maanik Gupta. We will be covering the Mitnick attack. I'm Maanik Gupta, by the way. First, I will cover some background on the attack. It occurred in 1994. The attacker was Kevin Mitnick, who was one of the biggest hackers of his time. He was on the FBI Most Wanted list, and he had stolen over information from over 20,000 credit cards and hacked into many phone companies. This attack was done against the physicist Tsutomu Shimomura, who was very interested in cybersecurity and was developing tools to protect security vulnerabilities. Mitnick had previously been using primarily social engineering techniques and tactics in order to perform the attacks, but this attack was much more technical. But nonetheless, he set up the situation as advantageous as he could, finding out when Shimomura would be out of town and then running the attack. He exploited the fact that Shimomura's personal computer trusted Shimomura's other computers. Mitnick used IP spoofing and TCP sequence number prediction to send packets from his computer and trick Shimomura's PC into sending all its files to Mitnick's computer. The IP spoofing was used to pretend to be a trusted computer in order to establish the TCP connection in the beginning, and the TCP sequence number prediction was used to make sure that the data was transferred properly and was able to reach Mitnick properly. And the most interesting thing about this is the fact that after this very vicious attack where almost all of Shimomura's data was stolen, Shimomura actually released all this news publicly in order to quickly narrow down the vulnerability and find out how it was done and how to protect from it, because he was so determined to create a safe and secure environment. Now, for more information about the attack itself, there were 4 steps followed to attack the X-terminal. The X-terminal being what Shimomura's computer is referred as. First, he used the sequence number prediction in order to he needed to find the sequence number prediction, and he found this by sending SYN requests to the X-terminal and received SYN and ACK responses. Then he sent reset packets to the X-terminal to clear the half-open connection from X-terminal's queue, and he did this multiple times and found the number pattern. Then he did a SYN flooding attack on the server, and he sent half-open SYN requests from the spoof IP as a result, and so the server was silenced. Because of this, he could now spoof the TCP connection. So now he used the X-terminal, in response to the SYN requests, was sending SYN and ACK responses to the server, but the server didn't get them because of the fact that the server now is muted. Finding out the number pattern, Mitnick predicted the ISN, and then he spoofed the ACK response to the X-terminal to complete the three-way handshake. Thus, he was able to spoof the IP and start the connection. Then he ran a remote shell and used the TCP connection between the trusted server and the X-terminal. Mitnick was able to send a remote shell request to Shimomura's computer and ask it to run a command. Then he opened specific files like the rhost file and added a command where he wrote echo ++ to the file. But through this command, he was able to create a backdoor in the X-terminal so that he could get to the shell on the X-terminal at any time and without having to repeat this attack. So there was a permanent connection. In this way, Mitnick was able to attack Shimomura's computer and create a connection that would last until it was found, and thus download all of Shimomura's tools and data. Now for some information regarding current techniques used when trying to recreate this type of attack. So first of all, neither IP sniffing nor TCP sequence number prediction is used these days for the attacks, because both techniques now defense is created or the connection protocol is now outdated. Instead, for accessing private information of the user, people will hijack HTTP sessions, attack on the DHCP, or perform attacks on ARP. Hijacking HTTP sessions is done by capturing the HTTP cookie generated during the beginning of the session and then using that cookie to resume the session. This is possible because HTTP sessions don't have a different cookie throughout a single session. So they can simply reuse that cookie if it hasn't expired in order to continue that session. This would allow one to access information in a manner similar to the Mitnick attack, because the same cookie is used for authentication and doesn't change even as many transactions are done on that session. Aside from the HTTP session attacks, there were attacks done against DHCP. And these attacks are typically done by spoofing either the client or the server in the protocol. When a client first sends a DHCP broadcast message to establish a connection, they will send this message to multiple servers, and multiple servers will respond before the client is supposed to pick out the right one. But the attacker can pretend to be the server that the client device wants to connect with, and thus a malicious connection can be established, allowing the server to do whatever they want with the client. Then, on the server side, it is possible for a rogue client to send broadcast message and have the server accept, thus creating a malicious connection in this manner. The main issue is that DHCP has no way to authenticate the entities. It makes sure that the connection created is stable and that both parties have the information they need, but it provides no security in and of itself. And the last attack I will cover are attacks made against ARP. ARP attacks are typically done through exploiting the lack of the message authentication and integrity similar to DHCP. There is ARP spoofing, where the attacker will transmit spoofed ARP requests or a reply in LAN in order to have all the traffic that is typically sent to the victim's IP instead be sent to the attacker, thus allowing the attacker to steal all the victim's data that way. Now my groupmate Christeena will be covering the rest of this PowerPoint, starting with challenges regarding the Mitnick attack.
My name is Christeena. Now I'm doing the challenges of the Mitnick attack. When doing the Mitnick attack, the attacker should face some challenges. The attacker should know or find out the pattern of the initial sequence number of X terminal. Mitnick found the initial sequence number by sending a reset response to keep the X terminal from being filled up for many times, and then he found that the initial sequence number are not random, but there is a pattern between two successive TCP sequence numbers. Another challenge in this attack was to send a connection request from the trusted server to X terminal. Mitnick needed to send out a SYN packet from the trusted server to X terminal. X terminal would respond with a SYN plus acknowledged packet, which was sent to the trusted server. Since the trusted server did not actually initiate the request, it would send a reset packet to X terminal, asking X terminal to stop the three-way handshake. Mitnick solved this problem by silencing the trusted server. So Mitnick launched a SYN flooding attack on the trusted server before spoofing. Back then, operating systems were far more vulnerable to the SYN flooding attack. The attack could actually silence the trusted server by shutting it down. Mitnick also faced some challenges when he spoofed the TCP connection. In order to establish a TCP connection between the trusted server and victim's X terminal, he has to do the three-way handshake. Therefore, in three-way handshake, Mitnick sent a SYN request to X terminal using the trusted server's IP as a source IP address. X terminal then sent a SYN plus acknowledgement packet, the acknowledgement response to the server. Since the server had been shut down, it would not send reset to close the connection. Therefore, to complete the handshake protocol, Mitnick spoofed an ECK packet, which is acknowledgement packet, which must acknowledge the sequence number in X terminal's SYN plus acknowledged packet. Unfortunately, the SYN plus acknowledged packet response only went to the trusted server, not to Mitnick's machine, so he could not see the sequence number. However, because of the prior investigation, Mitnick was able to predict what this number was, because in those days, the sequence numbers are generated in a number pattern. So he found out the number by understanding the pattern. So he was able to successfully spoof the acknowledgement response sent to the X terminal to complete the TCP three-way handshake. In this way, he completed the TCP three-way handshake. Now, the impacts of Mitnick attacks were, if the attack is successful, then the attacker can run any command in the victim's terminal, so that the attacker can modify the files stored in the victim's computer and can see any sensitive information stored in the victim machine. Therefore, identity theft, information theft, and stealing sensitive information from the victim machine are the major impacts of Mitnick attack. Also, he can log into the user's virtual machine without using any password. The improvements made in the security after this attack was nowadays initial sequence numbers are random. To ensure there is no any numeric pattern for generating the initial sequence number. So to ensure connectivity, each byte to be transmitted is numbered. During connection establishment, each party uses a random number generator to create initial sequence number, which is usually different in each direction. Another major improvement that was made in the network security is a new protocol called SSH was developed. Therefore, nowadays the current network security is using SSH instead of RSH. During the Mitnick attack, they used RSH. Nowadays we are using the SSH protocol to transmit the data because SSH is more secure than RSH. Also, SSH uses encryption for transferring the data, but RSH is not using any encryption for transferring the data. Therefore, SSH provides a secure channel between two hosts on a network. Countermeasures that are taken for preventing the Mitnick attack were the first one is use SSH protocol instead of clear text protocols such as HTTP, FTP, Telnet, RSH, RLogin, etc. Encrypt the session ID so that it will increase the complexity for attackers to predict the session ID. Use long random numbers for session ID. Another countermeasure is use intrusion detection systems to detect any session hijacking attacks. Use network-based intrusion detection system and host-based intrusion detection systems together, as network-based intrusion detection systems can scan port and host-based intrusion detection systems can scan host. So by detecting the port and scan, these intrusion detection systems can detect any potential attack. TCP wrappers, tripwire are some commonly used host-based intrusion detection systems to detect the attacks, and some network-based intrusion detection systems were Zeek, Surigata are some of the network-based intrusion detection systems to detect the attacks. The current network uses SSH protocol to transfer data because SSH encrypts the transmitting data. The encryption used by SSH is intended to provide confidentiality and integrity of data over an unsecured network, such as the internet. Another trend was when establishing a connection between two computers, the two computers will generate a random initial sequence number using a random number generator. People also installed some network-based intrusion detection systems such as Zeek, Surigata, and host-based intrusion detection systems such as TCP wrappers, tripwire to detect Mitnick attack or any TCP session hijacking attacks. In conclusion, Mitnick attack is a TCP session hijacking attack, and this attack happened in 1994. During that period, the network security is not secure, and the attacker Mitnick attacked Tsutomu Shimomura's external computer by implementing the TCP connection. By performing the man-in-the-middle attack under a spoofed identity, Kevin Mitnick exploited the trusted relationship between two computers, which which are Tsutomu, Shimomura's X terminal, and trusted server. If Mitnick attack is successful, then we can run any command in the victim's terminal. But now the network security has improved and the Mitnick attack is no longer practical. During the 1990s, people used RSH, which doesn't encrypt the transferring data, but nowadays we are using SSH protocol to transfer the data because SSH uses encryption, which makes the transferring data more secure. Using network-based and host-based intrusion detection systems, using SSH protocol, and using long random numbers for session ID are some of the countermeasures for preventing the Mitnick attack. Thank you. So this is our reference page, the references that we used for this project. Thank you.